Lauren, are you there? Hi, Dawn. Hi, Tasia.
Hello, Melissa. Thank you so much for doing this class.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Things are good.
I didn't realize I was muted earlier, so hello.
Hi, Dawn.
I'm gonna have to run out later, so you don't see me, I'm driving.
Okay, no worry. So it's 1 o'clock and we're scheduled to begin at 1. I'm hoping that we may have a few more people sign on. If we just wait a couple of minutes, usually, people start to log on just after the class time starts. So by 1:05, maybe we'll have a little bit of a bigger crowd, but regardless, I actually have a PowerPoint presentation prepared for you guys today. I never get that fancy, but there were a lot of things to outline today, five things in particular. So I wanted to make sure that I had organized everything and that we weren't forgetting anything, so. How was everyone's weekend?
Very good, beautiful.
Good, great weather,
Gorgeous weather yesterday.
beautiful. Lauren, are you there?
Yes, sorry.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Welcome, it's nice to see you. So as I mentioned, we'll get started in just a minute. Before we begin, did any of you have any specific things you wanted to cover today? about home inspections, and I'll make sure I leave enough time to get to those topics. Anything specific? No? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Just
Okay.
basically, you know, I'm sure you're gonna cover, but how to handle if you're on the listing side. I'm sorry.
How to handle it when you're on the listing side?
Yeah, when you're on the listing side, and do you go into the inspection as a listing agent? Do you, or, some people sit in their cars. I've been getting so many different,
Mhm.
how people all handle it. I mean, there's
Sure.
at least 3 or 4 different ways people handle it. I've gone into home inspection, and this was a Keller William agent from our office. He wasn't even there. He
Mhm.
just, so that's something that people do. I can't make it. Get the
Why don't we
keys
start
here.
there then? And we'll start with that question. The presentation today is mostly more so from the perspective of, the buyer agent's perspective of handling the inspection, but that's a great question. So you can, as the seller's agent, if it's your listing, you can really handle the home inspection in any way that you wish. But keep in mind that, in Massachusetts, this is a quote, buyer beware state, where buyers are responsible for all of their own due diligence and all of their inspection processes, if they even want an inspection. However, beyond there, as sellers representatives, we are the extension of the seller. So anything that the seller knows that is material fact or hidden defect about the property, we have an obligation to disclose that. So if we know that, if we as a seller representative, we know that, say, the home has been tested for lead, that's something we need to disclose. Even if we learn that the home was tested for lead prior to our client's ownership, that's something we know. We are an extension of the seller, we have to disclose that. Something else, quote, hidden defect would be, has there ever been a fire in the property? That might not necessarily be visible, that would be hidden. If there were, repairs to the home after a fire. Something else I can think of off the top of my head, because I recently experienced it, was I have home sellers in Sharon who at one point filled in a swimming pool in the backyard. So that's not something visible. That's something that is, quote, hidden, a hidden defect. So anything that cannot be easily discovered or visible by a home inspector or a buyer, those are things that we have to think about disclosing, okay? Also, something say like we've treated for carpenter ants in the past. We've treated for termites in the past. There might not be any visual evidence of that. We are aware that an underground oil storage tank is present, or that an underground oil storage tank was removed. That might not be visually obvious either. So anything, So I'm on a tangent here to see it, but I'll circle back now and finish. So whether or not you should be there is entirely up to you. I have found in my experience that many sellers, really would prefer that I be there. But then I have the conversation with them about, keep in mind that anything that I learn at inspection that I didn't previously know, I then have an obligation to disclose moving forward if the deal for any reason were to not move forward. So I then have more material fact knowledge about the property that then, I have a disclosure concern, as do you. So you have to decide, do you want me to know more things about the property that could be negative or change a buyer's perspective about whether or not they want to purchase the property? I personally don't want to know more than I already know about the property. So as the seller representative, I don't go unless there's a reason that I have to be there. I don't go.
So you just give them the lockbox combo
Yeah.
and that's it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And they probably already have it anyway from, their showing. So I'm more of a hands-off for access type of agent, where I don't necessarily like to be there for all the showings, and I certainly don't want to be there for the home inspection. But what I do is after showings, at the end of the day or after inspection, I may just go back to the property myself to make sure that the air conditioning is set to where it needs to be, or the heat is reset to where it needs to be, that all the doors are locked, all the windows are locked. I may go by after just to secure the property. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a great explanation. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, good. You're welcome. You're welcome. So it looks like it's going to be the four of us today. So why don't we go right in and start with the presentation, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see, I am not the most skilled at this, but let's see if I can. Slideshow. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. And you can make this as large or as small as you want. But let's start here. So as you know, I'm Melissa Garlisi, and I serve on the ALC here at the Market Center. And I've been with this Keller Williams office since December of 2005. So I just celebrated my 15-year anniversary in December. And I've been a realtor for 19 years. So I've been to countless home inspections on both the buy side and renegotiated maybe on the seller side. And this is just a summary of the notes that I've accumulated and that I think will be helpful for all of you to know. So let's start with the first one. So we're going to cover 5 things today concerning aspects of the home inspection. So there are 5. What's the purpose of the inspection? How do you integrate the inspection contingency in the offer? Inspection items, what you should be inspecting for, as well as just a brief touch on the inspection report. And then what is our KW Showcase compliance aspect that has to do with inspections, okay? So let's go right in and we'll start with number 1. But first, what's not the purpose of the home inspection? Oh, I see Bruce is logging on too. That's great. So can anyone think of what not is the purpose of the inspection?
To nickel and dime the sellers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The inspection is not a license to nickel and dime. The inspection is also not an automatic license to renegotiate the deal, especially in a market like this one where properties are few and far between, and we see many buyers waiving their home inspection contingency entirely. How about anything else? What's not the purpose of the inspection? You guys think of anything else? Well, there's really just one, and that is it's not an automatic license to exit the deal either, but we changed our minds. We don't want to buy it anymore, though, this can be an exit strategy. If, your buyers genuinely have a change of heart and they just cannot or do not wish to buy the property, they can go through with their home inspection and come up with some things that were unsatisfactory and leave the deal. Though I don't recommend that as an exit strategy. And again, this is not an automatic license to renegotiate. So what is the purpose of the home inspection? What are some ideas that you have as a group?
Cover the big ticket items. Structural issues. Is there mold? Is there any type of termite issues? We can't see the electrical and the plumbing, so I'm not sure.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Are there other things you can think of? Why else would you want to do a home inspection, not only to just check out the structure? What other things might you want to check out?
Just to have a basic knowledge of the workings of the house, maybe to see, how old something is or how long something might last or.
Exactly. Okay. Let's go on. And I've summarized these for you here. So number 1 would be definitely the safety of the structure. Is the house falling down or is the house standing on a solid foundation? What does the sill look like? Is the roof ready to cave in? Anything of that sort. So what is incorporated within the safety of the structure? So the roof, the windows, the sill on which the structure sits, and the foundation walls, ceilings, and other things. So safety of the structure, is it going to be safe to live here? And you know, I didn't even think to include mold. Number two would be the purpose of, you know, checking the safety and the longevity of the systems in the home. So to see, you had checked on some, you had mentioned some of these too. So the heat, is the heat functioning? What kind of heat is in the house? How about, is there air conditioning in the house? You want to look at the air conditioning. Same would be for the plumbing. Does the plumbing seem to be functioning okay? The electrical, what does that look like? Are there any obvious hazards? And these are things that a general home inspector is going to just systematically inspect and look at for your clients. Number three, any hidden defects. So we talked about what some of those hidden things could be earlier. And really another purpose of the home inspection is, do I really want to pay the agreed to price or renegotiate based on what the findings are? You know, do I, and last would be really, do I even still want to buy this house? So is there anything egregious that came up? Is there anything that maybe was a surprise to the seller? Those things are very important. And this doesn't necessarily just stay with, you know, the structure itself. There's also stuff in the yard and there's stuff in the neighborhood. So let's go on to the next slide and we'll talk about those things. Well, actually, I first put in how to include the inspection contingency in the offer. So let's start there and then we'll go on to the inspection items. So how do we include the inspection contingency in the offer? How does that work? Thoughts, anyone?
Yes, well, now we're doing a lot of aggregates for $5,000 and $10,000 people are putting in instead of actually waiving it completely.
That's true. So not only, so how do we put the contingency in? So we're going to put this contingency in an addendum, or we're going to write it in additional terms and conditions. So I'm going to go to .loop really quick and see if I can, how do I minimize this? Let's see. Oh, I am. Give me 1 second. Like I said, I'm not the best with the technology here. So let's go to .loop for just a minute. Are we all familiar with .loop?
Not yet here.
Not yet. Okay. You'll probably, Dawn, want to start with command. That would probably be a bit easier.
Okay.
So I want to look at a couple of different ways that we can write the addendum in. So there are a couple of different contracts to purchase that are available to us. One is the MAR form, the Massachusetts Association of Realtors form, which is the one that I use. And then we also have the GBAR, the Greater Boston Real Estate Association form. So if you're using the Massachusetts Association of Realtors form, it is 2 pages. And I'm sorry for the barf factor here, but I'm going to scroll through this first page and go to the top of the second page where you'll see inspections. So on the top of page 2, with the Mass Association form, the inspection contingency is already written in here. If your buyer chooses to waive the inspection, you can strike this paragraph B, inspections altogether. And if you are going to waive that home inspection, you do want to somehow, you know, strike it or write in, you know, waived in this box here where you can see my cursor. That would be important to do. So, you know, what does the inspection contingency look like? Personally, I stick to this form. I like this form because it gives me some specificity and generality with the home inspection. So if I use this paragraph, my buyers can inspect for absolutely anything by whatever date I'm going to put in here in this paragraph. The other forms, you have to actually check the boxes as to which contingencies you're going to include, which inspection contingencies you're going to include. So from a buyer perspective, I prefer this form here. From the seller's perspective, I may prefer the Greater Boston form because it's a lot more specific and lays the foundation for, well, what are they actually going to inspect for? From the seller's perspective, the less they inspect for, the more attractive that is from the seller's perspective. But from the buyer's perspective, I want my buyers to have as liberal of a license as possible. So I also like this form, this mass form inspection contingency, because this doesn't state an aggregate amount that Tasia had mentioned earlier. So the GBAR form, the Greater Boston Real Estate Association form, is going to actually prompt you to fill in some sort of a dollar amount. And some of those forms actually state, and these estimates must be accompanied, or estimates must accompany if there is any request for renegotiation. So personally, from the buyer's perspective, I would prefer to avoid that. But from the seller's perspective, it definitely gives my seller more protection. So what does this contingency actually say? Let's just read this one. So inspections. The buyer's obligations under this agreement are subject to the right to obtain inspection of the premises or any aspect thereof, included but not limited to home, pest, radon, lead paint, energy use or efficiency, septic and sewer, water quality, and water drainage by consultants regularly in the business of conducting said inspections. And this would be one of the buyer's own choosing and at the buyer's sole cost by, and here is where you would fill in the date. If the results are not satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole discretion, the buyer will have the right to give written notice received by the seller or seller's agent by 5 o'clock of the calendar day after the date that we set forth above, terminating the agreement. So that's important. And upon receipt of the notice, this agreement would be void and all monies returned to the buyer. Failure to provide timely notice of termination shall constitute a waiver. In the event that the buyer does not exercise the right to have such inspections or to so terminate, the sellers and the listing brokerage each are released from claims relating to the condition of the premises that the buyer or the buyer's consultants could reasonably have discovered. So there's a lot in this contingency. It states, what you can look for. Inspection is not limited to home, pest, radon, lead, energy efficiency, septic, water quality, water drainage. You can really look at anything if you use this particular paragraph. And this is another reason why, again, I really like this mass form. I'll see if I can find just real quick the other contingency page that maybe we have under KW buyer forms. Let me take a quick look. I'm sorry again for the bar factor. Let's see if this is the one I'm looking for. No, it isn't. I don't use this one, so it's not as familiar to me. Okay, here we go. So the offer to purchase contingency addendum includes the mortgage as well. And then you can see the inspection contingency. And again, we're looking to fill in a date, an aggregate, and a date by which the buyers must provide written notice if they wish to exercise their inspection contingency. And you would check these boxes here if you wanted to include the inspection contingency, the radon, the pest, and the lead. Anything that you don't check here, you can then not hang your hat on as part of the inspection contingency terms. So if your buyer does not check off here that they want to have a pest inspection, just as an example, and then all of a sudden, the inspection results come back and it says, well, the house has been completely destroyed by termites or carpenter ants. We want out, or we want to renegotiate. Well, guess what? You didn't check off pest inspection contingency as part of your inspection contingency terms. So I'm sorry, buyers, but that's not something you can hang your hat on. So this is why I like that broader offering of that mass association form. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes, no?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right, good. So again, that to me is important, and that's why I prefer that mass association form. So again, how do we write in the offer? In the addendum, and we're going to give it a time limit. In practice, through all my years in real estate, unless there's something very significant that needs to be inspected thoroughly and cannot be done in 10 days, we usually see an inspection window that's no longer than 10 days. And in this market, as competitive as the market is, 10 days is a little long on an inspection contingency. We are seeing that window shortened. But keep that in mind, and there's a reason why. So when does the inspection happen? It happens after acceptance of the offer. And in some places in Massachusetts, the purchase and sale agreement is signed before the inspection is done. However, in our area, generally we're looking at a timeline of inspection is going to happen within 7 to 10 days of acceptance of the offer, and the purchase and sale agreement will be signed between 11, maybe 10 or 11 days, as many as 14 days after acceptance of the offer. It does make sense to me. It makes better sense to me. And I think, in practice to most realtors in this area, that you're better to have the inspection first and then sign the purchase and sale agreement before the attorneys have gone through all the rigmarole to create this purchase and sale agreement, and the deal doesn't move forward. So in our general area, we're going to see acceptance of the offer, followed by inspection, and then the signing of the purchase and sale agreement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. How long do we have to inspect? Okay, so I just talked about this. Generally, no longer than 10 days. So what happens if we inspect on day 11, say, as example? I'm sorry, we inspect on day 9 and we find something very egregious, and the buyers elect to have it further investigated by their inspector, or maybe they need an electrician to come in and evaluate what the real issues are with the electrical system and what's the cost to fix it. So what do we do in that case? We can file for an extension of the inspection contingency that both buyer and seller agreed to in writing, somehow in writing, in order to extend that inspection contingency. And, in the offer, the inspection contingency is written that, time is of the essence, and that the buyer has to use their due diligence to inspect as diligently and quickly as possible. And that's a real concern for sellers at any point in time, and, regardless of what the market conditions are. If the seller is open to accepting an inspection contingency, it really is incumbent upon the buyer to move things as quickly as possible so that you're not wasting the seller's time. Time is money. Not to mention, if you're ready to buy a house, you want to buy it as quickly as you can, or certainly on the timeline that has been agreed to on the offer. So why do we generally see that 10-day window of inspection? Why is that common practice? It really has to do with lead inspection contingency. In the state of Massachusetts, any home built prior to 1978 has the potential that there's a lead hazard in the house, whether it's on the exterior or somewhere in the interior of the property. And by Mass state law, we have to allow buyers to inspect for lead. We can't deny them that opportunity, and we must offer them a 10-day window of opportunity to inspect for lead, or longer, as might be agreed to by the parties. So that 10-day window for lead inspection, we've just come to this practice in Massachusetts, where generally we're going to look at that 10-day window for general inspection as well, because we want to allow them the opportunity to inspect for lead. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, sample forms. So I mentioned earlier, and we were looking at earlier, that we looked at the dot loop forms, and they're also available in Command under DocuSign. So you can be looking for those. Whatever format is provided to us in either dot loop or DocuSign, those are the forms we should be using. Please use those forms. We do not want to use any other forms that are not provided to us in dot loop or DocuSign, because you could be opening yourself to liability for both yourself personally and for the office. So there's a reason why the office has provided us with all the forms that they have. please stick to those. If anything has to be altered, changed, or added, please refer to your client's attorney, whether it's your buyer's attorney or the seller's attorney. That's important, okay? And it's important to mention, just given the market that we're in, is your buyer waiving their inspection contingency, or are they going to have it? There is an opportunity maybe for your buyer to inspect, quote, for informational purposes only. So let's take a minute and talk about this. So from the seller's perspective, if a buyer is going to inspect for informational purposes only, there are really two ways that this can happen as far as I'm concerned. If your buyer is going to inspect for informational purposes only, does that mean that regardless of what the results are, they're going to continue with the deal anyway? Or does that really mean that if they find things they don't like, they're going to back out of the deal? I don't know. It could be either of those things. So as the seller's agent, I want to specify that. I want to know what's their real intention. From the buyer's agent perspective, I want my buyers to have every opportunity to inspect and make sure that they want to buy this property. But in this market, they may choose to waive their inspection contingency just to get their offer accepted. It's a slippery slope. It's risky. I don't condone it, but it is something that we're seeing more and more frequently in the market today. So if you have not been in the market for a long time, if you haven't written many inspection contingencies, if you're in the mentor program currently, make sure that you're talking to your mentor, or if you have any questions, talk to someone who you know and trust here in the office who can give you some good strategy advice. So far as some of my clients having waived inspection contingency, recently I've been writing those, if truly they do want to waive the inspection contingency, I want to know, are they waiving it entirely, or do they want to have one for informational purposes, just for planning of their home ownership? What do they want to know what they're going to need to address sooner than later? So if my clients truly have it for informational purposes, if it's going to have absolutely no bearing on whether or not they're going to move forward with the deal, then we may write the contingency in as home inspection to be conducted for informational purposes only after the signing of the purchase and sale agreement and escrow deposits received, with no opportunity for the buyers to renegotiate or terminate the deal based on inspection results. So that's the most protection for the seller. That's the least amount of protection for your buyers, but that could be a strategy, that you can use. Does that make sense? Or any questions? No. Okay. We'll move on to the next slide. Very good. Okay, here we go. Here's the meat of it. What do we inspect for? So basically, there are kind of two segments here. There's discovering with the town as much as you can, which is the town hall files, and I have 6 items there, versus the home itself. What's present at the home? And now that I think about it, I probably haven't included everything here, but we can add those things on. So let's first talk about the town hall files, and there are at least 6 of them, okay? The building department. Okay, why would we want to look at the building department? Any thoughts on what's at the building department?
Permits.
Absolutely, permits. For example, there's a brand new kitchen in the house. Was the work permitted? Did they pull a permit for that work? Was the electric panel updated? Did they pull a permit for that work? Did a licensed electrician do the work? How about the plumbing? Is the plumbing up to code? If things come up at the home inspection that are of concern, sometimes you can go back to the town hall and just look for those things to see, oh, well, this makes sense. This makes me understand why in the basement, all this plumbing looks wonky and the inspector's telling me that it's not to code. When they added that, for example, basement bathroom in the corner of the basement over there, they didn't pull any permits to do the work. Okay, so that can be a bit of a slippery slope. As the seller's agent, I never look to see what's permitted. As the buyer's agent, I'm going to want to encourage my buyers to look and see what is permitted for lots of reasons. We may want to go to the Board of Health. Why would we want to go to the Board of Health? what would that help us with if we go to the Board of Health? There's one thing in particular I'm thinking of.
Septic?
Septic, exactly. Okay, awesome. Good work to see it. So one thing you're going to want to know as the seller agent, is this property on town sewer? Or is this property on septic? What happens to all the wastewater in the property? Does it go to the septic system in the backyard? Or does it get flushed down the toilet and go out to wastewater treatment through the sewer system? As the buyer's agent, it's very important that your buyers understand, is this property on town sewer? Am I going to have to deal with the septic system? So for properties that are on a septic system, the place to go to look at the design of the septic system is at the Board of Health. The Board of Health will have on file all of the record of the particular septic at this property on site. Where is it? What does it look like? Is there an engineering plan? How old is it? When was it installed? Have there been any updates to the system? And now the seller also in Massachusetts cannot sell a property. Well, actually they can, but only in a few situations. If you're representing a buyer for a property with a septic system, it is the seller's responsibility to deliver a certificate of compliance for a brand new septic system or recent repairs to a septic system, or a passing Title V certificate for the septic system that's in place. As the buyer, I need to have that in hand. If I am financing the property, the lender has to have that in hand. And the place to get that is going to be at the Board of Health. So the Title V or the certificate of compliance for a repaired or brand new installed septic system has to have a date stamp within 2 years of the closing date. It can't be any older than 2 years. And the Board of Health is the place where all these details about the septic system are kept on file. Okay, so you're going to want to go to the Board of Health. The Board of Health also could be very helpful with water as well if the town, if the home is serviced by a private water supply. Engineering. Why would engineering be an important place to go? Can anybody think of that? Engineering works hand in hand with the building department, and it's important to know where the property lines are. Now, there isn't always an instrument survey in every file or for every subdivision or for every planned community. But the building department and engineering may be able to tell you if there's anything pending in the neighborhood. Is the street going to be widened? Is your buyer going to lose some frontage over a period of time if it's a busy street or a main street or at an intersection? Like, think of what's happened on, for example, Route 18 from Weymouth, all the way down into Whitman and beyond. There are residential properties on Route 18 with frontage on Route 18. Route 18 has gone from 2 lanes to 4 lanes through all of Weymouth. If I owned a house on Route 18, I could have just lost some of my frontage in my front yard. So engineering and the building department would be able to tell you about that, or any plans for any land taking of eminent domain that might affect this property or the abutting properties. So that's important. The tax assessor, maybe you wanted, the next item is tax assessor. Maybe you just want to confirm, well, what are the taxes on this particular property, and is what's been disclosed on the MLS for the tax figure, is that actually accurate? And maybe the tax collector's office. Can anyone think of a situation why it would be important to know if the taxes are up to date?
A lien on a property?
Yes, a lien, exactly, Tasia. And that is important in cases of short sale or especially foreclosure. So or maybe your buyers are going to buy a property at auction. When your buyers buy a property at auction, specifically foreclosure auction, they're inheriting all the title issues with the property, and that includes any outstanding taxes that might be unpaid. And usually when taxes are unpaid on an auction property, it's not just 1 quarter, it's usually many quarters to many years. So that's really important. And maybe there are some other places at town hall that you might want to check things out. One in particular that I can think of here, and part of your home inspection contingency, is go to the police department if you want to. check out what's the crime rate in the neighborhood? Are there any registered sex offenders living in the neighborhood? All these things are very important, okay? Very important. And you may want to verify as well with the Board of Health or the building department, is this a public water supply or is this private well? Okay, important things. All right, let's move on to the home.
I
8
have a
things
quick
about the house. Oh, sure, sorry. Go
Sorry.
back.
Would the Board of Health have any record of any lead or mold or anything like that?
They may,
Okay.
only if some big stink was made at the property about it and reports were put in the Board of Health file, or maybe at the building department. If there was ever a lawsuit about anything at the property, those documents would be in the file as well. So that's a great question. So, because Title V, which involves the septic system, and that's state mandated, because that is state mandated, the Board of Health is required to get involved.
Mhm.
Lead testing is not a requirement to sell a home. You're required to be in compliance if children under the age of 6 are going to live in the property, but it's not a requirement to sell or purchase a property. So licensed lead inspectors are only obligated to report the results with the state, not to the individual towns.
Okay.
So there may not be a record. There probably is not going to be a record of any lead tests with the Board of Health. If there's a private well on the property, chances are the Board of Health is not going to have anything on that either. However, if there is public water supply for the particular home, the Board of Health will always have on file the latest water quality testing reports, which they're required to do, periodically and publish and send to all town residents periodically. I think it needs to be done annually in most towns.
Mhm.
That's a
Okay.
great question, Lauren. Thank you. Does that make sense?
Yes, yep.
Okay. All right, good. Moving right along. So the home itself. Okay, 8 items on the home. What are we looking for on the house? General inspection. That includes the structure and the systems. So heat, plumbing, electrical, foundation, sill, walls, ceilings, windows, doors, staircases, roof, sheds, decks, all of those things. General inspection. What else are you going to look for? Mold. You may want to test for mold. You may not want to test for mold. It's entirely up to the buyer. I leave all these decisions up to the buyer. It's important to test for mold, especially for any family or individual who's going to be occupying the property with any health concerns that can be exacerbated by mold. So that's important. That's a separate test outside of general inspection. Radon testing. We have radon all over the South Shore and the Metro West area. Radon occurs naturally through the breakdown of bedrock material. So in any areas where you find a lot of ledge, you can have radon. So there's ledge all over Braintree, all over Quincy, all over Weymouth, even in places where ledge may not be visually obvious, where, say, you go into the backyard of the house and there are all these rock formations all over the place. That's an instant telltale sign. Oh, we should be testing for radon. But really, you should be testing for radon regardless. I always encourage my clients to test for radon. It's one of those hidden defects that if you don't test for it, you're not going to know whether or not it's there. Radon is odorless, colorless, invisible. It's radioactive, and it is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States, second only to smoking. So if you don't test for radon, you will not know whether or not it's there. You can always test for radon after the fact, after you purchase the home. But if there is radon in the home, you want to mitigate it before you take occupancy, because again, it can be very health hazardous. Pest inspection. You'll want to be looking for pests as well. What are pests? Okay, that can be termites, carpenter ants, powder post beetles, so any wood boring insects. And also it can be, for little critters, little friends living in the house, mice, rats, raccoons, squirrels, any kind of critter that might be looking to get inside for the winter months or to get to a food supply. a general home inspector is going to have a good idea of whether or not there are any pests in the house based on what he or she finds. Lead paint. You can also test the home for lead paint. So in Massachusetts, homes that were built prior to 1978 have the potential for a lead hazard in the home or on the home. If the property was built in 78 or after, the lead law does not apply. So I want to encourage you all, if you haven't tuned into a lead class yet, or haven't in a while, I do recommend take a class on lead inspections. Donna Frano is covering those classes for us now. And you can also take a 2-hour continuing education class for 2 continuing ed credits for your license renewal. It's really important to understand how lead can affect the health of those living in the house, and therefore relaying to your clients how important it is to test for lead if children under the age of 6 or even any pregnant women are going to be residing in the home. That's very important. All right, what else can we test for? So what's a 6th item that we can be looking for? Title 5, the septic. It is incumbent upon the seller to have the septic system tested and designate that it is functioning as intended and does not need any repairs or replacements prior to closing. So not only for practicality purposes, that when you move into this house as the new owner, if you flush the toilet or turn the sink on or use the laundry, that the wastewater from the home is going to be carried away and taken care of as needed and intended. Why else would it be important for a buyer to understand the status of the septic system? Can anyone think of that? Anybody? Okay, I'll share with you my thoughts and why I always talk with my buyers about where's the septic system in the yard. So physically, where is it? You want to know where it is. You want to know where the boundaries are of the leaching field. Where's the distribution box? Because your new owners, your buyer clients, they will eventually be the sellers. They want to know where these things are to not only keep them in good working order, but to understand where they can't put the in-ground pool, or where they should not put and expand their driveway onto, or if they're going to put up a deck or patio, is the deck or the patio going to encroach on the leaching field? And does this affect the use of the system and the viability of the system? Absolutely, it absolutely does. If your buyers have envisioned this, say, beautiful backyard with an in-ground swimming pool, is where they intend to put it, right where the leaching field is located, that's a problem. So your buyers need to understand, where is the septic system, where is the leaching field, where are the components, where is it in the yard, because that affects their use of the property. Now, additionally, if the sellers have disclosed, and we see this all the time on the South Shore, be looking for this in a listing, new septic to be installed by sellers prior to closing. That's an instant notification to you to look into that if your buyers want to buy this property, because they need to know, again, where's it going and how does it affect my use of the yard, but also physically, what is it going to look like? Is this new system going to be a big mound somewhere in the yard? Is it going to be a huge mound? Is it going to be, is the house going to sit below the septic system, below the leaching field? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be much bigger than what is here? Is there going to be a retaining wall? All of that is important. They want to know where it's going to be and what's it going to look like, because that affects the use of the yard. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, that can be a really big deal. So septic system, we need to be looking at that. That's important. Well water or water quality. If the property is serviced by a well, your buyers may wish to conduct a water quality test. They want to know, is it truly, is it drinking water, or is it, strictly potable, or is it, for laundry only? Or is it strictly for irrigation? Is it for outdoor use only? All those things are important. What you're irrigating onto your lawn can be of a very different quality than what you're going to be using to cook your food, or to brush your teeth, or to shower in, or, to consume right out of the tap. So water quality can be very important as well. If that's important to your buyers with a private water supply, you definitely want to have them be looking at that. And there may be some other things about the home too. You know, are there signs of, I'm just trying to think of an example. So let's talk about termite treatment. So back in the day, there's been an evolution of termite treatment, for example. When I first started in real estate 19 years ago, a Centricon system or a canister system had really just come into use. So if you walk around the perimeter of the exterior foundation of a house, you may see these green canisters placed every 5 to 10 feet around the perimeter of the home's foundation. That's a clear indicator that the property had been treated for termites in the past. Those systems were these canister systems that were baited, and the termites would go into these baiting systems, leave the baiting systems, and carry the poison back to the termite colony and kill the colony. We don't see that used as frequently anymore. Sometimes we do in like larger infestation cases. And prior to Centricon treatment or canister treatment, there was a system of drilling holes into the concrete foundation itself, or maybe say in the concrete pad of the garage, or the concrete pad if the foundation is a concrete slab foundation. You may see some drill holes systematically drilled every 5 or 7 or 10 feet. That is a visual indicator that the property has been treated for termites in the past. Maybe in the basement, the inspector sees this pipe sticking out of the foundation wall close to the sill, or maybe there's just a hole there that's been blocked up with maybe some steel wool or some fabric, some cloth or cotton or something like that. That could be, isn't necessarily, but could be an indicator that maybe there was an underground storage tank at one point in time, an underground oil storage tank. If there were, in the past, you'll want to know that that was properly removed, or if it's still there, even more important if it's still there. I've only had 2 occasions in all my 19 years as a realtor where an underground oil storage tank had been abandoned and was never removed from the property. That's a big deal because they deteriorate over time, and that fuel is then a hazmat situation. So it has to be very carefully and systematically taken care of. The fire department has to look it over. The Board of Health has to look it over. The state has to sign off. It's a big deal. So often you will see that clause in a purchase and sale agreement that to the best of the seller's knowledge, there is not an underground fuel storage tank on the premises. So that's important. Okay, so that pretty much covers all of the basics. Some other things may come up. Follow the lead of the inspector if anything else of concern comes up that is of concern to your buyers. Any questions on what we might want to be looking at the town hall or with the fire department or with the police department, or anything at the home itself before we move on? Any questions? Okay, let's move on. Okay, we'll just briefly touch on the report. So, the inspector comes in, and what happens to all this information that the inspector verbally talks about or demonstrates to the buyers and their agent? Some of the reports are still handwritten, where the inspector is going to write everything down in the report, check off some boxes. He or she will explain what this report actually means and will give a copy to the buyer at the conclusion of the inspection. Or I've seen more and more these days, a digital inspection report, where instead of handwriting everything on the report, the inspector is going to use a laptop or tablet and just type things in as they go room to room, or maybe story to story, and then we'll deliver the report by email to the buyers after the fact. So those are the only 2 types of reports I've seen, handwritten or digital. I don't know, what others we're going to see. So very important outside of the inspection itself is a compliance issue here at the office. So I want to conclude our class today with the compliance pieces. Any of you who know me well, which Tasia, I know you know me pretty well. I am one of the compliance freaks here in the office, and I'm always talking about compliance, how important it is to be compliant, be compliant. So there are 5 forms here at our office that we use. Sometimes there are more, but really 5 forms that we're looking for compliance. And again, you can get all these forms either in command through DocuSign or on .loop. Number 1, there's a recommendations indemnification form, also known as the "you're promising not to sue me" form. And really quick, I will exit out of this and go to .loop to show you what that looks like. I probably should have loaded it, but I'll show you here in my own loops. So I'll show you something that is closed. Okay, I closed on 31 Anderson Road in Braintree several months ago. So, you know, we have one. Well, actually, let me use a different example because that was a seller transaction. Let me go to a buyer transaction for you. Sorry. Let's go back to loops. Foundry Street in Easton. Okay, I sold a condo in Easton a few months ago. Let's look at that. So here are my offer forms, and I'm going to have right here is the example of the recommendations indemnity statement. We provide this to you. Your buyers need to sell it or sign it, or your sellers need to sign it. So this is important twofold. First, it says that you as the buyer agent or as the seller agent may make recommendations to the client about any vendors to use. So that's that middle paragraph here. Any vendor whom we recommend is done so strictly as a service to the client, and that the client has absolutely no obligation to use any of the vendors who we might recommend. That's true for the buyer or for the seller, and that it is up to the buyer or the seller to decide whether or not they are satisfied with the services that the vendor has provided. And the top paragraph talks about how that could be relate to, you know, inspection or radon inspection and pest inspection, maybe a title attorney, a mortgage lender, that we make those, again, recommendations strictly as an accommodation. So that's the recommendations indemnity form. That's the first one. The second one would be very important for compliance. Home inspection facts for consumers, okay? This is super important when you're working with a buyer client. It is mandated by mass law that as a buyer representative, we have to provide this information to the buyers. We have to provide this. By law, we are required to do this. So I recommend share this form with your buyers, either through Command DocuSign or through .loop. Share it with them, provide it to them. And where's my paper trail for that? You can see, well, actually, it doesn't say shared, but I can go back into this form, Home Inspection Facts for Consumers form, and look at the history of it. That I have actually shared it. History. So we can see that, you know, I sent it on September 11th. I loaded it into the file, and that I shared it as a PDF, and that I sent it to my buyer in a view-only format. So she doesn't need to sign that. She just needs to confirm that she got it. So you can see here, this says that Selena Tennant, my client, viewed that form, okay? So there's my proof if I ever needed it. And then beyond that, the third form is the Home Inspection Facts for Consumers acknowledgement. And this is where my client actually signed the form that she received the Home Inspection Facts for Consumers brochure, okay? So this is all in my loop, or all in DocuSign. So that's the third form. I'm going to go back to my presentation just to remind myself. So we have the recommendations form, the brochure for home inspection facts, the verification that the buyer has signed that they've received the brochure, and then, you know, number 4 would be lead paint property transfer notification certification. Again, very important. Take the lead paint class. That's a separate class. It takes forever to go through that form. But you want to be working digitally these days, online, sharing all forms, collecting all signatures through Command DocuSign or through Dotloop, because this is your paper trail if there's ever an issue relating to home inspection, whether you're on the seller side, you're on the buyer side, it doesn't matter. Command DocuSign or Dotloop is going to give you your paper trail if it ever goes to trial. So lead paint is something you're going to need to be compliant on, and you always, number 5, want to collect the mold form as well. Okay, always. Best practices, again, DocuSign and Command or Dotloop for paper trail purposes. Any questions there before I move on to our final slide?
Anita, thanks very much for the great information.
Which is basically, thank you, and the end. So, don't forget to be diligent. Get it in writing, preferably get it in writing digitally through DocuSign or Command or through Dotloop. And be a great co-broke. Okay, take that class too, how to be a great co-broke. Very important. So I hope, Guy, I know you logged on, late in the presentation, which is perfectly okay. But I just wanted to offer you all the chance. We've got just 3 minutes left. If you had any questions for me about anything that we covered today.
Thanks for the great
Oh,
information.
you're on mute. Sorry, I can't hear you. Well, actually, you're not on mute. I don't see that you're muted, but I can't hear you. I'm sorry. You know what? It's me. Sorry. My speaker timed out. Just give me 1 second. It'll come up. Hold on. And okay, there it is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
I just want to say thank you for the great information. Even though I logged in late, but I learned something new. So for the recommendation indemnification form, is that required or is that more like optional? I never provided to my client, but I always.
That's a great question. I thought that it was required. So let me just, I won't share my screen, but I'm just going to go into Dotloop now. And if you go to templates, let's see. I thought it was required. But let me just take a look and see. Usually they'll say optional versus required. So let's see. Notice standard form. Sorry, just looking for it. They'll say optional. And they should be.
I closed that one deal last month, and I didn't include that form. I don't know the person who reviewed the Dotloop file. She didn't say anything. So
okay, because I show it here on the checklist as required, but I might be looking at an older checklist. I recommend you get it anyway. It's in the KW buyers forms. Okay. File, and it's in the KW listing forms file as well. I recommend getting it, honestly, in either case, whether you're working with the buyer side or the seller side, we are in such a litigious, society that any option to sue you, this is, it's not going to save you in a court of law, but certainly it'll help your case if you're ever sued. Okay. How about the mold form? I always recommend that. Absolutely, hands down. Always, always, always get the mold form. I personally would make that mandatory, especially now if you're buyers. It becomes more and more important to get that recommendations indemnity form, the lead form, the mold form, in the facts for consumers acknowledgement on the brochure, especially if your buyers are going to waive a portion of or entirely their home inspection. If anything ever comes up after the fact, after the closing, you're sued, the buyer sues the sellers, the only leg you'll ever have to stand on are these forms in writing with signatures and the paper trail that shows when you shared them and that they received them and acknowledged them. So I highly recommend as many forms as you can get signed, okay?
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
great question, Yi, great question.
Might be a little bit annoying to have the buyer side that many paper.
I know it is. It's a pain in the neck, but the more diligent you are. But you know, I also see this as an opportunity to promote yourself as a professional, where you're saying to your buyers, listen, I understand you've made these decisions to inspect or not, but these are all the things that I just want to make sure that you're aware of. So let's walk through these forms. I want to make sure you understand what you're saying yes to or what you're saying no to. Does that make sense? And I find for me and my clients, it's never a problem, and they actually appreciate the diligence. And they are then, therefore, from my perspective, I know, making an informed decision. If they have read the brochure Facts for Consumers about home inspection, if they've read the mold form, if they've properly understood if they properly, you know, have understood the lead form as well, they understand what they're saying yes or no to and making an informed decision. So that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much.
You're
I appreciate
welcome. You're welcome. Oh, I'm going to sign off. I think somebody else may be waiting to use the channel here. So thank you so much. If I can help you further, just let me know.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Bye-bye.